The history of Jamaica over the past 6,000 years has been marked by the courage of the Jamaican people in their triumphant struggle for freedom and justice, and by their unrelenting resistance and determination in the face of adversity and discrimination. The first Jamaicans were the Taino Indians who settled in Jamaica around 4000 BC. They were Stone Age people who had migrated to Jamaica from the northern coast of South America. They had a thriving civilization, and they had over 200 villages by the time Christopher Columbus set foot on the island in 1494. At that time, they numbered 60,000 people, and they thrived by cultivating corn, gathering local fruits, and catching fish and turtles for food. The earliest record of ganja was in the writings of the Chinese Emperor Shen Yun, dating 2727 BC. He mostly wrote about the herb's medicinal value, focusing on its use in treatment of malaria, gout, and rheumatism, and ironically, absent-mindedness. Christopher Columbus arrived in Jamaica on May 5th, 1494, and within 50 years, he completely wiped out the Taino people. He traveled primarily to the Caribbean, including the Bahamas, Cuba, Santo Domingo, and Jamaica, and in his latter two voyages traveled to the coast of eastern Central America and northern South America. Jamaica was settled by the Spanish in 1510, and the indigenous Taino people were forced into slavery and eventually exterminated. In the early years of the 16th century, the practice of importing slaves from West Africa to work in Jamaica began. Approximately 600,000 slaves were brought to Jamaica in 1533. In 1655, a British expedition under Admiral Sir William Penn and General Robert Venables captured Jamaica and began expelling the Spanish, a task that was accomplished within 5 years. The reason they began importing slaves is because they had killed off all of the Tainos who did all of the labor, and they were down to just 3,000 people in population from 60,000 people just 50 years prior. Jamaican enslaved people came from West and Central Africa and Southeast Africa. Many of their customs survived based on memory and myths. Now it is turning out that there are people of Taino ancestry who are alive and well in Jamaica, especially in the South Manchester, St. Elizabeth region. From 1845 to 1921, over 36,000 East Indians, mainly of the Hindu faith, were brought to Jamaica. And with them, they brought their faith and, of course, ganja. East Indians are the largest ethnic minority in Jamaica. The impact of Indian culture on Rastafarianism can be seen in the use of marijuana. Indians introduced marijuana to the people of Jamaica as a means of achieving spiritual union with God, and this practice eventually became a key element of Rastafarian belief and practice. For both religions, cannabis is a sacred herb that facilitates a spiritual enlightenment and connects them to God. They believe that it opens the third eye, allowing them to access a higher level of consciousness. When they smoke marijuana, they experience a sense of oneness with the universe. The influence of Indian culture on Rastafarianism is also evident in the Rastafarian unique hairstyle, dreadlocks. For both dreadlocks signify the rejection of the world's pleasures and material detachment. The Jamaican government enacted the Ganja Law of 1913, outlawing the herb despite its immense popularity. It did nothing to slow or stop the use of the herb. It only served to create an additional burden on the court system and to allow for their incarceration of many people, especially those of the poor rural areas and the ghettos of major towns. In 1914, Marcus Garvey launched the United Negro Improvement Association, UNIA, to create an international awareness of the right of the black race to coexist with other peoples of the world as equals. Garvey awakened black consciousness and pride in millions of blacks in Africa and the Africa diaspora. By 1938, dissatisfaction with the Crown colony system, sharpened by the hardships and suffering brought on by a worldwide economic depression, erupted in serious and widespread rioting. These events resulted in the formation of the first lasting labor unions, as well as the political parties linked to them. A growing demand for self-determination also became apparent. Political agitation by Jamaican activists and trade union leaders led to the granting of a new constitution in 1944, providing for a two-party House of Representatives, the appointment of ministers, and universal adult suffrage. Further constitutional advances took place in 1953 and 1957, and full internal self-government was obtained in 1959. In 1958, Jamaica became a founding member of the Federation of the West Indies, from which it seceded in 1961 after a referendum. On August 6, 1962, after 300 years of British colonization, Jamaica became an independent nation full of dominion status with the Commonwealth. The legacy of Africa lives on in Jamaica in countless ways. It is most evident in the ethnic composition of the Jamaican people, in the Jamaican language called patois, whose grammar and punctuation are heavily influenced by the Twi language spoken in West Africa, in Jamaican music and dance, in religious worship and rituals, and in food and dress. Jamaican slaves came from the region of modern-day Ghana, Nigeria, and Central Africa, and included the Akan, Ashanti, Yoruba, Igbo, Ibibio peoples. By the 18th century, Jamaica had become one of the most valuable British colonies, but the conditions endured by the slaves were horrendous. Families were routinely separated, housing and sanitary conditions were horrible, beatings and torture were rampant, many died from overwork and starvation. Life expectancy of a West African slave in Jamaica was just 7 years. The slave trade was abolished in 1807. By then, almost 2 million slaves were traded to Jamaica, with tens of thousands dying on slave ships in the brutal Middle Passage between West Africa and the Caribbean. Then, after almost 250 years of rebellion and resistance, emancipation from slavery was finally won in 1838. The U.S. government passed the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 that effectively banned the use and sale of ganja. Years later, the act was ruled unconstitutional and was replaced with the Controlled Substance Act in the 70s that established schedules for ranking substances according to their potential for addiction and how dangerous they were. Ganja was placed in the most restrictive schedule, Schedule 1, which consists of drugs like LSD, ecstasy, and heroin, despite the proven value of the herb as a medicinal plant that could successfully be used in the treatment of cancer, glaucoma, arthritis, epilepsy, chronic pain, depression, and a host of other medical uses. On August 6, 1962, Jamaica became an independent nation. The Jamaican Labour Party won the general election to the House of Representatives, and Sir Alexander Bustamante became the first Prime Minister of Jamaica. Between 1962 and 1989, the two major political parties alternated in power, with each party serving 2 consecutive terms. By the 1970s, the group The Wailers had taken over the airwaves, and Peter Tosh and Bob Marley were huge proponents of the cannabis plant. And not only did they include it in their music, they included it on their album covers and told everyone they could about it so that they could take the stigma of the cannabis plant away, that it was negative. Bob Marley can be said to have influenced millions of people to use the magic plant through his music and through his movement. His music partner and great friend, Peter Tosh, did the same. There have been many other proponents of the magic plant, but these two men were definitely the pioneers of the movement. The state of California was the first state to approve the use of ganja for medicinal purposes in 1996. Had it not been for Jamaica's influence in the cannabis culture, we would have to wonder if this would have even happened. Jamaica has also made incredible leaps and bounds when it comes to the legalization of cannabis. And just in 2015, cannabis was decriminalized. And guess who did it? The first female Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Most Honorable Portia Lucretia Simpson Miller. The Ganja Law, or Dangerous Drug Act, was passed by Jamaica's House of Parliament in February 2015. The law went into effect on April 15th, making possession of 2 ounces or less of cannabis a non-arrestable, ticketable offense that attracts no criminal record. It also puts in place regulations for marijuana use by persons of the Rastafarian faith and for medical and therapeutic and scientific purposes, including development of the legal industry for industrial hemp and medical marijuana. This paved the way for Jamaica's biggest expo and business conference, CanEx, where people from over 40 different countries attend to discuss cannabis and how they can collaborate. Businessman Douglas K. Gordon is the founder of CanEx, and we had the opportunity to film our documentary at his 5th and 6th annual event. CanEx is an event like no other where you are able to meet global leaders from all over the world. In March 2018, Balram Vaswani, a longtime advocate for the legislation of marijuana, opened the first medical marijuana dispensary, Kaya Herb House, in Drax Hall, St. Anne. As of 2021, the Jamaica Cannabis Licensing Authority authorized 29 cultivators and 73 transporters, processors, retailers, and others. Jamaica has definitely come a long way in the last few years, and we are projecting that the government will be benefiting tremendously in 2023. I think it's such a beautiful story that cannabis was introduced to Jamaica by West Indian indentured servants. And 173 years later, it's a West Indian that opened the first medical dispensary in Jamaica. As of 2023, there are over 70 ganja dispensaries all over the island. Ganja has been medically prescribed and recommended for relief from the symptoms of many diseases and conditions. Some of these are glaucoma, anxiety, general nausea and vomiting, pain caused by structural or psychological disorders, neuropathy, migraine headaches, muscular plasticity and limb pain, treatment for symptoms of AIDS, treatment for symptoms of movement disorders like Tourette syndrome and Parkinson's disease. A chemical in ganja helps to stop cancer from spreading, may slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease, appears to lessen the side effects from treating hepatitis C and increase treatment effectiveness, can help with inflammatory bowel disease, helps to relieve arthritis discomfort, helps people suffering from PTSD. Some of the recreational benefits are: it helps us to relax, can open up one's mind to new ideas and possibilities, Smoking ganja helps people to experience things like music and films more intensely, can spur creativity in those who are artistically inclined, can help one to get in touch with one's higher self spiritually. Products can also be made from the plant. Hemp, also known as industrial hemp, is a variety of the sativa plant that is grown specifically for the industrial uses of its derived products. It was used in China and the Middle East from as far back as 8000 BC. It can be refined into a number of commercial items such as textiles, clothing, paper, canvas, boat sails, animal feed, paint, biodegradable plastics, oil-based products, and biofuel. Like Carl Sagan said, the illegality of cannabis is outrageous, an impediment to full utilization of a drug which helps produce insight, sensitivity, and fellowship so desperately needed in this increasingly mad and dangerous world.